Welcome to the Event Engine Podcast. This is your host, Lee. And today we have on the show none other than Dean Rees. Mate, how are you today?
Good, Lee. How are you doing?
I am doing good, but I'm also enjoying the green of your t-shirt. For those who are listening in on audio, check it out on YouTube. How good that green is. Is that got a special name?
This is obviously a branded
Yeah.
T-shirt of the Melton Mowbray Town Estate. So
Yeah.
the crest and everything dates back to 1549, believe it or
Holy
not.
smokes. That's amazing.
Mm.
And the green is all part of the brand as well?
It is, yeah, it is. Although, having said that, we are literally in the process of rebranding, so
Oh
that could
no.
all change.
That could all change. Well, guys, if you want to see a historical rendition of the branding, then go and check out this episode. So, Dean, thank you for coming on the show. You've got a fascinating story that has literally taken you around the world. So, I don't want to do any spoilers. What we'd love to do is jump in a time machine and just find out first your first experiences of getting into the events industry, and then we'll just kind of use the TARDIS, as it were, and work our way through to present day. So, over to you, mate. Quick introduction
All
as
right,
to who you are, and then let's go in that time machine and start wherever you want to start.
no worries. Okay, so my name is Dean Rees. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of the Melton Mowbray Town Estate. I've worked in the events industry now for too many years to remember.
About
Um,
20 years.
about probably more than 20.
Plus a
But
bit.
initially, what happened was I didn't plan to work in events like many people. I ended up, especially old school people out there, I ended up sort of falling into events. But my my background training was actually in stage management and theatre production.
Mm.
So, sort of first 5 years of my life, I was working professionally in London theatres. And then I think around 97, a friend of mine who was working on a show with me started talking to me about doing event work or corporate events.
Mm.
Never really thought about it, never really understood anything about it. That wasn't really my world. But what I realized pretty quickly, this guy was a lighting tech.
Yeah.
So what I realized fairly quickly was the skills that I had were fairly transferable to
Yeah.
doing, corporate sort of events. Anyway, jump forward in time a couple of years, and that became sort of my bread and butter. Then I was doing fit ups, 1 day fit ups for events, and worked all over really as a freelancer.
Mm.
There were no sort of degrees in event management then. It was very much learning on the job,
Mm.
and I did. So started off, you know, say as a tech going into venues, helping build the events, do 1 day fit up, the event, and then de-rig. But after that, I'd sort of started to build relationships with the clients, and some of the venues I worked in, I was working at quite regularly. So one of those was the um, National Maritime Museum in
Mm-hmm.
Greenwich, and got to know that team really well. Eventually, they actually offered me some work within the venue.
Nice.
And that was really became my sort of career, if you like, or the start of my career in events. So we're now talking about 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Been doing that for a few years, but then decided, yeah, okay, I'll try this. It seems interesting. So I was then looking after the events that the museum were hosting, and that incorporated pretty much everything from sort of private weddings or high end weddings through to big corporate events.
Yeah.
And I stayed with them for I think 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5 years, but I was there a while, long enough to sort of, understand the basics of planning events and then eventually, with that, working through suppliers, et cetera, I sort of built up a knowledge and a database as you do of the
Yeah.
people out there you can really sort of rely on, or,
I
in
think
those.
as well, just to interject, that I reckon you probably learnt more than just the basics in 4 years, especially with the breadth of events that you were doing, not just weddings to corporate events. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean,
don't be too
we
humble.
wow. Honestly, it was a good learning for me because
Yeah, definitely.
the Maritime is one of the most prestigious venues in London,
Yeah,
of any of
amazing.
the major museums. So I was fortunate enough to do some really big events. Of course, a lot of our clients were across the water there in Canary Wharf with the big banks and
Mm,
the finance sector. So had some decent clients as well,
mm,
and really enjoyed it. And then the thing that really changed, or turned that around was a friend of mine had been out to the Middle East, and she came back from doing a gig in Dubai, and said to me, "Oh, you want to go out there? It's fantastic, unlimited budgets, great events, blah blah blah," all of which I'll come to. But basically, I was still at the Maritime in 2007,
Mhm.
and we could see what was coming up with the credit crunch, with the financial crisis.
Yeah, I remember it
And
well.
yeah, and being that our industry sector were very much, a lot of our business was very much based around the finance sector and
Mm.
the big banks and the corporates. You could see which way the wind was blowing. So I basically then decided I might just look at Dubai and see what it's all about. So what happened then was, I think I'd contacted an agency in Dubai. That's right. I
Mm.
contacted an agency, and so anyway, I flew out there, went out for a meeting, and immediately get to Dubai. It was sort of the land of milk and honey compared to where I just left. It's
Yeah.
financial crisis in London, businesses drying up. It's a really difficult time. So when I left London, it seemed to be the perfect time. So anyway, long and short was, they put me in touch with an agency, with a corporate event agency at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and I had another meeting with them. A few months down the line, I'd been offered a position. And honestly, it happened so quickly. I didn't have that much time to think about it. What I can say is, when I left London, the day I was leaving, I was on the Docklands Light Railway, and I literally saw some of these poor guys coming out of their offices
Mm.
carrying their possessions. So I'd
Oh,
left
man, yeah.
literally in the middle of that. So anyway, got out to the Middle East, got out to the UAE. As I say, I was working for a corporate event agency then. And interestingly, Dubai is like, small. It is a small place. It's not
Mm.
a huge city. It's not London. And at the time when I went there, it was also quite underdeveloped. So although they hosted some really big exhibitions like Gulf Food, Cityscape, these are huge, sort
Mm.
of 250,000 square meter shows. Um, the market itself wasn't that developed at the time. So I was one of these expats who went out there at a time where it was still
Yeah.
booming. So I think that was 2008. I eventually landed, got there, and got set up in Dubai. Completely different culture, different world. And it was a real learning experience. Having said that, the thing I loved about it was the cutting edge of new business. So where I'd been an account manager in London,
Mm.
dealing with, or chasing new business in Dubai, that really was sort of the cutting edge, because it was all about growth. The
Yeah.
city was expanding, the population was expanding, businesses were popping up all over the place. There were huge events going off. There were lots of new events all the time. So, for me, it was a really exciting place. I suddenly got to this place where it was sunny, hot,
Yeah.
but also there were a lot of other expats working there. And I got to know them pretty quickly. Got to know the scene there, um, the big events, who the sort of decision makers were, and settled into it fairly quickly, because I think you sort of hit the ground running.
Yeah.
For me, it was a case of sink or swim. You've just got to learn quickly, and
Mhm.
that means things understanding the culture, but also knowing who the suppliers were, bringing in the right suppliers, who the best partners to bring. So there's all of those decisions to make in real time.
Yeah.
And while I'm doing that, the agency I'm working for is also organising some of the biggest events in the UAE. I mean, we did the
Arabian Travel
opening.
Market?
Arabian Travel
Yep.
Market wasn't one of our shows, although I
Oh,
did
wasn't it?
work on.
Oh,
No,
because that
but
was
I did.
huge. That's one that came to mind, but yeah, carry on.
No, that's
Yeah.
a Reed show. That's not
Oh,
that's not that's
oh,
not the
right,
one.
okay. Yeah.
Um, I was working for, and say, a corporate agency at this time,
Oh,
and
okay.
they had their own exhibition, which I won't mention, but they had their own
Sure.
exhibition, but they also had a lot of corporate clients. And then we had, I suppose for me it was a case of just understanding the lay of the land,
Mm.
getting to work out, in terms of clients. There's a very different process in doing business in the Middle East as doing business here in London. We have email culture here. Everybody writes an email.
Yeah.
You sort of plan to meet somebody months in advance sometimes. There, it's very much about face to face and
Yeah.
getting to meet the decision makers. So that for me was also different. It was also
Actually sounds terrifying to me because I'm like, what if I forget something? I like email because everything's all written down.
listen. As I said, you're in the sink or swim situation,
Yeah.
and so at the end of the day, if you can understand that culture and you can see how best to approach your clients within that environment,
Mm,
it actually becomes quite easy, believe it or not.
sure.
Like for example, the decision makers will normally meet at the end of a day, at the end of
Mhm,
a business day. You never turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning for an appointment.
mhm.
You literally drop by. Basically, while they'll normally be having shisha and coffee, and
Yeah.
you happen to drop by. So essentially you then get invited into the meeting, and that's where you can really talk to people. So the
Whereas the
whole
benefit
business.
there is there's faster track as well, isn't there? Because with our email
Absolutely.
culture that we have, it is very much, you send it, you're only really dealing with influencers and parts of the team. And then eventually
That's it.
that's all got to get communicated up to the top, who need to meet about it and eventually make a decision, etc. Whereas what you've described sounds completely different and really exciting.
It is. It's very different, and it's a bit daunting, I guess, when
Mm,
you first. For me, it was at least. And but once you get your head around that, it actually becomes the norm, and you do understand then sort of the business etiquette around working in that part of the world.
yeah.
And it actually is a very, very important part. If you're going to network there, you've got to build your network very quickly.
Mm,
And I made some really good contacts with the UAE government, the Dubai government,
wow.
and that brought in business for the agency I was working for. So I was very lucky, I guess. I mean, I ended up working on some enormous events. The UAE National Day, it's like
Hmm.
the biggest event in the UAE that they hold every year to celebrate the union of the Emirates.
Wow.
So it's a huge event held in a stadium in Abu Dhabi, which obviously is the capital. So I got to do a lot of big events, a lot of really, really sort of stuff that if you did in the UK would be, you know, almost unthinkable.
Mm. Well, I
I
can
did
imagine. Unless it was the Olympics, I guess,
the
that
Olympics.
sort
Yeah,
of level.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's at the end of the day, it's events are events. I
Mhm,
think the processes are the same. You certainly don't have the same level of, or at that time at least, there wasn't the same level of expertise.
mm.
So there was always a bit of edge of the seat
I
moment
imagine.
when you
Yeah.
when you were doing a live event, and I could tell you some funny stories about things that did go wrong.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't funny at the time; they were
No, I was
funny
gonna
in
say,
hindsight.
and is it when you say funny, is that actually the trauma coming through?
Yeah, I think probably the trauma. Yeah,
Yeah, that's how
but
you're dealing
but
with
no,
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
we did the launch of a very well known uh, international defence expo.
Mhm,
Let's just give you one example. So when I met with the client, I was pitching to the sort of heads of the military.
mhm,
The head of the navy, the head of the army, head of the air forces, and that was quite a surreal experience.
mm,
You stood in a room surrounded by all these military, doing a pitch. And but again, very fortunately, the company I was working with, we won that pitch.
mm,
We actually won the business, and it was I say, the opening event of this huge defence show. And when you see it, you had helicopters flying in and all
wow.
sorts of manner of tanks and all sorts. It wasn't just us; it was a huge team of people that were brought in. But when you saw the scale of it, you just say, "Oh my goodness!" Compared again from what I'd done in London, which were mainly corporate dinners.
Yeah,
I did other types of events. I did away days and those sort of
sure.
things. But the scale of it was different, is what I'm saying. And that was the sort of level at which which I was working back then. But absolutely loved it. As terrifying as some of those situations, I mean, it's
Mm.
also really exciting to be involved in those.
Well, I've only arranged a handful of events myself as kind of the sole event organizer, where they were my events and people were coming to it, and I had to sell tickets and do all of the other stuff. And I do remember how stressful that was. And we're talking maybe 70 to 80 people in a room. I can't quite fathom how you're able to cope. Is there any kind of lesson you've learned along the way with regards to your team, or how to work on these kind of larger scale events where the pressure is quite immense?
Um, yeah, just have good people around you.
Mm,
It's all about the people, isn't it? At the end of the day, we work in an industry that is people focused,
mhm,
and I think you certainly with experience, you can work out who those people are that you would rely on, who you can trust in that situation. And that in itself gives you a bit of freedom, helps you to relax a bit because other people, competent people, capable people are looking after the event with you. So
Yeah.
even today, I have a small um, it's basically a choral concert and a musical performance
Hmm.
in our small market town here. The principles are the same. I mean, the suppliers that I work with today are tried and tested people that I know, and I'm confident that will deliver. So
Yeah.
even though it's different scale, it has exactly the same process. It's just that it doesn't have, I suppose, the profile of those sort of big
Sure.
events. I did, in Dubai again. Another one I did was a hotel launch for a very prestigious hotel.
Hmm.
I suppose the budgets for those things are the other big difference. You've got
Yeah.
people that are putting a lot of money into these, and that in its own way ramps up pressure on you as the
Mm.
organizer. But I never really got too stressed about it. I did in probably my private moments, but
Mm.
certainly whilst I was working, um, I always felt pretty confident. I don't know if that's
No.
stupidity or naivety, but one of the things and I kind of attribute it to my theatre training because I'd studied and they kind of drill it into you about how you present yourself when
Mm.
you're in a professional environment because in the theatre you can't have stressed actors going on stage if you're stressed. You
Yeah.
understand? So
Yeah.
you've got the stage manager is always someone who's trying to be or remain calm, even if the show is falling apart around his ears. But
Hmm.
that was something I've always kept in mind, that professionalism within my job and trying to stay relaxed is a big part of what we do because it can be a high stress, high pressure situation to be in. So for me, that I guess that's how I deal with it. But I think also having a good team, as I said, you can
Mm.
also they can relate to that. Like you can also you can release some of that pressure because you've got other individuals around you that you can go to who understand
Mm.
what you're going through and what the pressures are of
There's like that
the job.
shared ownership, isn't there, as well? I
Yeah,
remember my first event, I had no money to do anything other than everything myself. So it was all on me. By the second event, having other people involved and being able to go, okay, sound is on that person over there, and I am not going to worry about it or touch the sound desk once this event was just such a relief. Again, like you said, small compared to say the big budgets, but it's equally as important to the quality and the value of that specific event versus anything else as well. So that's great
yeah,
insights. Now you,
absolutely. I mean, I've worked as just a quick story here.
yeah,
I've worked
sure.
with some very, very well-known brands.
Hmm.
I mentioned the finance sector, so I don't need to mention names, but you can
Hmm.
imagine some of the banks and the level of events sorry, the level of execution they require to make
Yeah.
those events successful. But I don't treat a smaller event or of any less value. I see them all as the same. There is a process. You
Hmm.
try and deliver that to the best of your standard, or sorry, best of your ability, and then
Yeah.
I think that has to come from within. That's not something that can be taught necessarily. I think that comes from a passion for doing what
Mm.
you enjoy. So for me, it's all about the result. For the client or for my team, if it's an event I'm organising, it's all about bringing people together, delivering the best results, and
Mm.
you see it across the world. Wherever you go. I've worked in Asia. I worked in the Middle East. There's always that same attitude with events people, and
Mm.
you've either got that or you don't, and I think that's the defining factor of working in the industry.
Absolutely. Now, you have done this for a few years out and decided, I want to come back to the UK. Can you tell us what kind of prompted that? I believe you then became part of I think it was the East of England Event Centre
East of England Arena, yeah.
Arena.
So
I knew it was something.
yes, yeah. Listen, I should have mentioned that growing up and in my early professional career, I was London based. I'd
Yeah.
never worked outside of London. And but what happened when I came back from Dubai? I came back for personal reasons, by the way. It wasn't
Sure.
because I wasn't enjoying the work. I loved my life out
Mm.
there, but I had to come back for family reasons. But
Sure.
when I did come back, it was 2017. So I'd been out there almost 10 years at this point.
Hmm.
And so when I came back, a friend of mine who I'd worked with in the Middle East said to me, "Oh, I have a mate in the UK um, who's looking for a business development director." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So didn't really think anything of it. And
Hmm.
then right as time went on, eventually I met up with this guy, and this guy turned out to be the venue director at the East of England Arena.
Yeah.
Um, Never in a million years did I think I'd even be working outside of London, but I ended up in Peterborough, of all places.
Of all places. Well, at least if
Peterborough.
you ever need a passport, you can just pop down the road. So,
Yeah, true, true. I actually don't think they're there any longer. I think
oh,
that
aren't they?
closed.
Done it.
Yeah, I think that closed years ago. But anyway, Peterborough. Imagine I'd come from Dubai and I'm now in Peterborough. This
Yeah.
is the contrast.
Great cathedral, though, mate. So,
Great cathedral. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely. But having said that, when I met the venue director, and if you're listening, hello, Jason. If you're When I met the venue director, what I realised was this venue had huge potential,
yeah.
and it really did. It was a showground. It wasn't your traditional indoor,
Hmm.
you know, corrugated box.
Sure.
It had a lot of potential. This venue. So when I met with the venue director, we talked about the business. We talked about how we'd grow the business, and for me, that's the exciting part. Is the journey.
Mm.
That you get to the events part, but the journey in building the business is also quite an that process to me is also something that gets me up in the morning. So
Mm.
eventually, once I'd met with venue director and we'd had a lot of conversations about the future and what that looked like. I decided that I'd move. I left London. I went up to the to well Cambridgeshire, East Midlands at the time, and then spent the best part of the next 5 years building their business at the East of England Arena. And that in its own way was really exciting because we were the underdog when you
Mm.
compare our venue to places like NEC Birmingham, XL London. We were very, very parochial backwater, really.
Mm.
Yet with that, we managed to bring in some of the biggest shows in the UK. And, some of these shows were huge. I mean, absolutely huge. So Plant Works is a plant machinery show that we brought in. We
Yeah.
had, Lama was a massive agricultural and farming machinery show. All of these events that we brought in really happened quite quickly.
Mm.
We rebranded
Yeah.
straight off the bat. The venue wasn't called East of England Arena. That was the first thing I should
Yeah.
mention. At the time, it was called the Peterborough Showground. And that name just summed up really the aspiration at that
Yes.
time. So the rebrand of our East of England Arena was the strapline to that was gateway to doing business in the East of England. And
Yeah.
we did genuinely believe that because there was a lot of untapped potential. And the location of the venue itself was north south on the A1.
Hmm.
So in terms of geographic location, we were really central uh, to a lot of organisers who were doing shows around the UK.
Mm.
So we're very fortunate because I say we picked up some business fairly quickly, and that was it. We didn't look back then, and we'd go down to trade shows in London. We'd go to the usual trade shows in London. We'd see the other venues. They're much bigger, but bigger venues than us. But yeah, we absolutely crushed it at the time,
Yeah.
and we did
That's
that for
awesome.
5. Yeah, we did that for 5 years. Absolutely loved it. And the way I saw it was, we were always punching up.
Yeah.
But eventually, I mean, I think yeah, it was Exhibition News Awards, EN Awards. We
Hmm.
entered best venue over 10,000 square meters. We were up against the biggest and best venues in the
Mm.
UK, and we, lo and behold, actually won the award. We won the award, so it was a real moment. Sort of, we've reached a real point here. So, and against the odds, because I say we were not, we were a tiny venue compared to some of our competitors, but I really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was
Sometimes,
good fun.
though, Oh, so I can still hear your passion about this. Like, you're clearly still excited about what happened and very proud of it. I can see body language wise, you're like, you've animated. So if people, again, if you're not watching the YouTube channel, go check out, this guy is animated and excited. But that's the difference, isn't it? Some of these big venues have huge teams, and a lot of people are just paid to be in a role. So I sometimes think that the motivation for those people to really make a splash tends not to be there, because it's more of a job, it's more of a process. There's more red tape, etc. Whereas what you're describing sounds like something that's very fluid. It's moving very fast. You can make decisions and test ideas, etc. And you all have a passion to go from, hey, no one's really heard of us, to, hey, we're here, we're on the A1, come and do your event here. And you can again see that passion that you were talking about back in the UAE as well.
Yeah, and to be honest, it wasn't in that sense. It was very similar to when I landed in Dubai.
Mm,
Because the first thing I had to do was establish who I could bring in very quickly.
yeah.
It was no different at East of England Arena. The first thing was rebrand. Second thing was partners. We looked
Hmm.
for the correct, marketing partners to bring in. We wanted obviously production partners. We wanted catering. All of that had to be set up, sorted out, and delivered in fairly quick time. So we did. We managed to get all of these partnerships in place pretty quickly. Landed a couple of the bigger events. They came to the city. We then once that sort of traction began,
Mm,
we could then go off and talk to potential sponsors or partners within the city. I spoke to most of the hotels then, because they realised the increase in footfall to the city would
mhm,
generate business for them. So it's almost like that traction that sort of has its own momentum,
mm,
and eventually you reach a point where and we did reach this point fairly quickly. I'll say within 3 to 5 years, we had really established the venue, the businesses, or sorry, the events which had
mm,
come to the venue. So we were fairly up and running by that point. Unfortunately, things sort of changed very rapidly because the owners of the venue were a charity.
mm,
They actually owned the assets, the land. They decided they wanted to sell the asset, which, as you can imagine, had a huge impact
mm,
on the business. So
mhm.
at that point, having already gone through that journey, I thought for me probably is now a good time to move on.
Yeah,
So I decided then, and sadly, that had to happen because I think there were divergent views on the future of the venue.
sure. Ah,
But I loved it while we were there, and we had the team that we had. We had a great team.
sounds like an incredible time, mate.
Yeah, we could have good
It
fun.
really
It was
does.
good
I
fun.
feel like I've lived some of it with you. So, so we're now in modern times. There you are,
Yeah.
sporting the current brand.
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about what you're up to nowadays, buddy.
So I should probably explain how I got here and what here is, what that looks like. I actually live in Melton Mowbray.
Hmm.
Even when I was working at the East of England Arena, I was commuting.
Yeah.
Um, the the organisation I work for now, the Melton Mowbray Town Estate, is essentially it's a charity. It's a registered charity, but it has a very, very long history.
Mm,
In fact, dating back to 1549.
that's insane.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's a bit different, let's say,
Yeah.
to working for Reed Exhibitions or working at
Sure.
East of England Arena. But what I liked about it is the assets that the town estate manage are basically um, there's a number of properties within the
Mm,
town. There's also a number of green spaces, including the town's parks.
mhm,
And when I spoke to them about this particular role, the thing I liked about it was that we both agreed that they wanted to monetize their asset.
yeah.
But straight away it was, well, events in the
Mhm,
parks,
mhm.
in the town. So very quickly I realized the opportunity to this, and it wasn't long then before I started developing a business plan, looking at who we could bring in, partnerships, etc., etc. Now that was only last year.
Yeah.
This all happened
Wow.
in 2024. Um, Roll forward to today, 2025. we've now got all our partners in place. I've got my catering, I've got my bar company, I've got my production company, I've got, entertainment talent agencies,
Yeah.
all of the ingredients that we need to sort of build the events here. And really the monetization of the asset is about supporting the charitable activities. As
Mm,
I mentioned, the East of England were managed by a charity, so I sort of had some
mm,
experience or knowledge of their role. The town estates remit, their charity's remit, and their function is to put back into the town. So the beneficiaries of what we do
mm.
are the people and residents of Melton.
Wow.
And last year, for example, just to kick things off, I just decided on the spur of the moment, right, we're going to show the World Cup, sorry, the Euros, the
Yeah.
England games on Euros. And remarkably, this had never been done in Melton. No, so it's a common thing you'll see
Yeah.
all over the UK, isn't it? Most big cities we should have a big screen
Yeah.
up and
Big
show the
screen
game.
up and yeah.
Yeah, so we just did that. I just brought in had a supplier that we worked with who brought in I think it was a 21 square meter screen, a 7 by 3
Blimey.
meter
Yeah.
screen, PA system, stuck it
Uh-huh.
in the park, and thousands of people turned
Oh,
up. It
that's
was
amazing.
ridiculous.
I'm
It
getting
was
goosebumps,
honestly,
mate. Yeah.
it was ridiculous. And we only started showing the matches, say, from the quarterfinals. The knockout stage was when I
Yeah.
decided, right, we're going to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was completely unplanned, really. I didn't think about it prior. Well, I did, but I didn't really think we would do it. I was planning
Yeah.
other stuff. In actual fact, it was a bit of a on the spur of the moment,
Yeah.
and as it turned out, people turned up in the hundreds and thousands.
That's
But
amazing.
and by the time we got to the final, I mean, our park, just to give people an idea, the capacity of our event space, which is a public park called Play Close Park, is only 6,200,
Mm.
and we maxed out the number for the
Wow.
final. So you
Yeah.
can imagine there were people everywhere. It was just a
I can
sea of
imagine. Yeah.
faces, and the main reason I wanted that one was to build a bit of credibility with the townsfolk,
Yeah.
to show them that the town estate were doing events and that we were doing these events for for the benefit of the town.
Mm.
But also I wanted to get their buy-in. Like later on, I knew that we would have to do ticketed events,
Mhm.
and there was going to be a bit of persuasion to get people to start parting with their hard-earned cash. So
Mm.
I started off with a couple of free events. We did some movies in the park just throughout the summer season. We did a few smaller events last year, and then towards the end of the year, we also host an annual firework event.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the firework event was 5,000 people walk in the park, stand there for 20 minutes, watch the fireworks, and then they walk out again.
Yeah.
That was the extent of it. So last year, I decided, right, we're going to change all of this up. Let's do something different, but B, in terms of quality, let's try and do something people have never seen before. So
Mm.
I decided then we were going to put a full-on stage with LED screens, and we had two headline bands playing.
Yeah.
So we built the fireworks around a concert,
Brilliant.
effectively.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I think a lot, the feedback was amazing. We had loads of people writing us and saying this is the greatest thing we've seen in Melton, blah blah blah. To be honest, it's lovely, and
Yep.
I'm really happy with the response. But um, it's just building on that momentum now.
Mm.
What I've always said to people is, we do these events for you guys. The more you guys support the events that we do, the more we can do. The more
Mm.
we can offer. So we're just reaching that tipping point now, I think, where we've already, we've done a ticketed event with the firework concert.
Mhm.
There was pushback. You can imagine people like,
I
oh,
can imagine. Yeah.
why are we paying? We've never paid for this. But
Mm.
but now I think the expectation has changed
Mm.
because they saw something of a different level, different quality.
Yeah.
So now this year we've got a load of other events now plotted in. So, and to be fair, last year I didn't really have the time to plan stuff. I literally joined, and it
Yeah.
was, you know, hit the ground running. Let's do
Mm.
an event. Let's show the football. This year I've been able to plan a lot more,
Mm.
both with my team and with our marketing partners, to work out what type of events we want to do, and B, how we're going to do those in terms of the programming and the schedule, because not all of them are ticketed. Some are still free
Sure.
events because,
Yeah.
as I say, we're a charity. But there are some sort of big ticket items within there. So this year we've got 4 music festivals,
Yeah.
all of which are now, well, sorry, three of which are now launched. One more
Mm.
left to launch. We're doing a couple of big weekends of giant inflatables, which doesn't sound very much on paper until you see the size of these
I have a
inflatables.
toddler who would go crazy for that. So yeah,
They
all good.
they they
I'm
were
there.
they were literally the park would just be full of inflatables. Um, we're also doing bands concerts, so
Yeah,
we've been doing those now since well, they've been running for a while, but we're doing some new ones this year.
yeah,
So that those are in the park. We've also got a number of other events which I want to, again, tying this up to the sort of heritage of the town estate and
yeah,
of Melton Mowbray is things like a May Day event.
yeah. Oh,
These are
lovely.
free to
Yeah,
attend, but very very different to what I was
yeah,
doing in the corporate world. So this is maypole dancing, interactive workshops, garland, flower garland making, Morris dancing, you name it. It's all of
yeah,
that kind of stuff, all of the traditional stuff. But in a way, I really like it
yeah,
because again gives something back to people. It also tips our hat to the heritage of the town estate. So,
yeah.
so it's exciting times, but we are very, very busy at the moment.
Well,
I think we have
my
days for
sister and my
events.
brother-in-law live in Melton Mowbray, so I'll be letting them know. I'm sure they already went to the football. He definitely went to the football, so
I'm sure he did.
I'll have to text him after this after this
And
call. I'll text him and say, "How was it, mate?"
Lee,
Yeah.
I think everyone came
I
to the
think all
football.
of Melton Mowbray was
Yeah,
there. So, but they'd be very excited as well, I'm sure. And also for us, I'm only down the road in Northamptonshire. Melton Mowbray is a really easy place to get, kind of for a lot of towns and villages around. You've also got Leicester just up the way there, haven't you?
yeah,
So there's an awful lot of towns that would definitely come down to Melton for some good shows, and I'm sure you've got some really exciting plans in the future.
we
So,
do.
but
We've got,
Karen,
I mentioned a couple of the festivals. I mean, we've got a festival called Melton Pop Festival, 21st of June.
yeah.
That is pretty much what the name says on the tin. We've got
Hmm.
the UK
What, everyone
special.
drinking fizzy pop? No, I'm joking. Yeah, yeah,
Not quite,
yeah.
but the theme of that event is going to be bubbles. So
Ah,
basically
wasn't
I
far
asked
off.
yeah, well, yeah, I asked the production company just bring as many bubble machines, as many
Yeah.
bubble artists as we can get.
Brilliant.
Um, but that's obviously aimed squarely at families and
Yeah.
families with young children. We've got three of the top UK tributes to Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, and the Ed
Wow.
Sheeran
Yeah.
coming to play for that one. So that's a day festival,
Mm,
and then 26th of July something a bit different because I really want to bring more people from outside into
mm.
Melton is Melton Scarfest. And most people remember, well, you're probably too young, Lee. I'm not, but you are. Sadly,
I'm
I am.
42. Am I too young?
I think you're a bit too young, yeah. But
Ah,
Scar still has an enormous following in the
mm,
UK, but it's made up of lots. The way I see it is, it's made up of lots of small groups spread around the country. So they do these things where they'll go to a concert or they'll go to, a gig to see their favorite band, but
mm.
they're not really on a big scale. What I want to do is actually bring them all together and do a festival of ska
Yeah.
for the fans of ska, two
All
tone,
right.
reggae, etc. So it's a very different thing to what town estate or what I've done before. But actually, again, I brought in partners who knew this scene, who brought the bands to us, who worked with us to create the running list, and it's worked well. So this year, yeah, we've got those two: the pop festival, Scar Festival. We're also the firework festival, which I mentioned earlier.
Mm.
It's also a concert, and that's happening later in the year. And I've got one more, which is to be announced, so I won't mention it just yet. But
So no
I'll be for
spoilers here.
no
Well,
spoilers to chat.
I think what would be lovely is for us to pop a date in for a year's time and have a catch up and to see how it's all gone, because it sounds like you've got some incredibly exciting plans. And if there's one thread I've seen throughout well, two threads. Number one, I've already kind of highlighted is your passion for this, but secondly, then is that an event, no matter what size or what type of event, needs good people. And again, you want those people need to want to create an experience for those who are going to be a part of it. I think
That's right.
they would be my biggest takeaways from everything that you've shared in this. So, have you
Yeah.
any last words, buddy, before we say goodbye and then drag you back in a year's time?
I would say to you, you should come along to one of the events, and I would suggest come to Scarfest or Melton Pop Fest.
Well, I will, and my brother-in-law is definitely old enough because he's in his late 50s, so he can tell me all about Scar.
Brilliant. All right, listen, it's been good talking to you, Lee. I've really
Thank you
enjoyed it.
so much.
All
Uh,
right, you take
all right.
care.
What's the best way for people to connect with you before we say goodbye, buddy?
Should mention that. So, through the website, so it's Melton Mowbray Town Estate.co.uk, or through
Mhm.
any of our social media channels. You can find us on Facebook,
Yeah.
Instagram, etc. Or just drop us an email. we're, we're a small team, but we're open to anybody who's looking to bring an event here. That's one thing I should mention.
Yes, definitely.
We've got, I think we've got a fantastic facility here. There's a lot going on to develop the infrastructure within the in the park
Mhm.
this year. So I've got a couple of organisers who are bringing shows. I should have mentioned them as well. One is a car show.
Mhm.
That I hope is going to be a popular show. They're looking at around 5,000 attendees, hundreds of classic cars. Fantastic if that works. I hope it does. And then we've got our third party organisers looking at bringing concerts in this year as well. So
Brilliant.
there's a lot going on. It's not just what I'm doing, it's also what
Mm.
other people are bringing. So
Yeah, with
we're,
yeah.
we're open to business. If people want to talk to us, then get in touch. And yeah, love to talk to them.
And I'd love anyone who's thinking of using Melton Mowbray who also does 1940s weekends to get in touch because I love those sorts of things. That was a good idea for you. You can have that one.
Thank you
Right,
very
buddy.
much. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your
Cheers,
time.
Lee.
We will see you again soon.
Thank you,
Cheerio.
mate. Take care.
Bye bye.